So the first thing I need for making this piece is some wire, and I've got some 0.8mm silver plated wire here, and I've got about 40 centimeters of that. And I also need my bead. So I've got this lovely little purple bead, and it is quite a small one, but I like working with small beads for these rings because it just works really nicely. And I also quite like that design. You could use a bigger bead, but I find the small ones are a little bit easier. So maybe practice on small ones and work your way up. And then I've also got my ring mandrel here, and I've got my pliers. So to start off with, I'm just going to thread my bead onto my wire and take it to roughly the halfway point in the middle. And then in a minute I'm going to shape it around my mandrel, and as always I make sure that I have a little mark at the size of my ring. So to do that, you just get a ring that you already have and place it on a mandrel. And a mandrel is just like a tapered stick. So this is obviously a wooden one. You can also get metal ones. So they're really, really handy for this kind of thing. Great, so I've got my bead, but before I place it on my mandrel, I want to bend the wire one side and then the other side. And this just really gives it a head start in the making of the piece. It just helps me to wrap it around, because if you try and wrap it without doing this bit first, it can make your piece a bit wonky. So then I'm going to place the bead on my mandrel and just hold it in the middle, and I'm going to wrap the wires around one way and the other way, just once on each side. So hopefully you can see here I've got one wire on the top, one wire on the bottom, and I'm just straightening out my wires a little bit at this stage so that they're easier to work with. So now I'm going to wrap the wires around the bead, and how I do that is I take the bottom wire and lift it up and over, and I take the top wire and lift it down and under. And at this stage I want to make sure my bead is nicely nestled in between those two wires and hopefully quite central. And then I'm going to wrap the wire again on each side under the wire that I've just done. So I'm going underneath the wire that I've just done. And I think the key to this ring is just wrapping a little bit at a time. So they're both going round in the same direction, but I do kind of half of a wrap each time on each side. And hopefully you can see that I've built up a nice little collection of wires there behind the bead, and it's all pulled nice and tight. So now I'm ready to take the piece off my mandrel, and you can see that there's a gap between the two little rings at this stage, but we're going to close that with our wrapping in a second. So I take one end and I just push it down through the middle of the ring and up, and I just do a couple of wraps on each side. Okay, there's one. And the same on the other side. So just two wraps to keep it nice and together. Great. And then at this stage I'll take my ring and put it back on my mandrel and just push it down. And what that does is just help to shape the bead, because shape the ring, because it's come out of its shape with all my wrapping. And I can try it on, make sure it still fits. Great, lovely. So now I'm ready to cut my wire ends off. So I'm just going to take my flush cutters. You could also use side cutters or any cutting pliers. Always when you cut, hold on to the end of the piece so that it doesn't fly off. And also always when you cut, squash the sharp ends in. So I'm just taking my pliers and very gently tucking those in. I always, with rings, I always put the sharp bit on the outside, even though I'm tucking them in, because with wear and tear, especially these kind of rings, eventually at some point it can come a bit loose, and if that does happen, it's really, really uncomfortable on the inside of the ring, so it's always better to have it on the outside. And there you have your finished ring. And yeah, and I like stacking these. I think they look lovely as stacked rings. They stack really nicely as well because they've got the kind of round bit. So I hope you enjoyed making this simple ring with me. If you'd like to learn more jewelry making, do subscribe. And yeah, I've listed all the tools and materials below. So until next time, happy making.